Welcome to Talking New York Real Estate with Vince Rocco. Our show is all about the exciting world of real estate and in particular, how it relates to the luxury New York marketplace. But if you are not planning a real estate transaction in New York, we still have plenty of information you can use no matter where you are. Now, here's our show. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome my listeners and viewers in the United States and all around the world. I am Vince Rocco, and it is Tuesday here in New York City, so let's go behind the headlines and discuss the state of our industry. But first, this is Talking New York Real Estate. And up front today, real estate is undergoing significant changes both in New York City and across the country, driven by evolving market conditions and overall economics. In New York City, the pandemic altered the landscape, with the rise of remote work leading to changes in demand for both residential and commercial properties. The focus is shifting from luxury developments to more affordable and sustainable housing. Technology, such as virtual tours and AI-driven analytics, is also reshaping how properties are marketed and sold. A key factor reshaping the industry nationwide is the National Association of Realtors' recent settlement. The legal challenges centered on commission structures and anti-competitive practices have prompted a re-examination of how brokers and agents operate. This has implications for markets like New York City, where transparency and competition may increase, leading to more consumer-friendly pricing models. The ripple effects of this settlement are being felt across the country, influencing how properties are bought and sold, and pushing the industry toward more equitable and innovative practices. And as I continue to say, the only constant in real estate here in New York is change. We will discuss and we will have all that and so much more as Talking New York Real Estate gets underway on this chilly Tuesday morning. And in the news this morning, the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development last week released proposed rules for 485X, the tax exemption that replaced 421A, and the new 467M, incentives for converting offices into housing. The proposals must be finalized before HPD can approve applications for both. Approved by state lawmakers in April, the 485X tax break is a 10-year program that succeeds the 421A, which expired in 2022 and gave developers a tax exemption for exchange for including some affordable housing units in residential buildings. The new program provides a 40-year exemption and up to 35 years. New York City's compost program is now underway in all 5 boroughs. On Sunday last week, curbside compost collection began in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, requiring buildings with 4 or more units to provide storage areas and labeled bins for yard and food waste collection by the Department of Sanitation workers. The program's final expansion follows its success in Queens and Brooklyn and aims to prevent rat infestations while prompting sustainability. Oy vey. New York City's Halloween's Open Street program returns for its biggest year yet, featuring over 100 participating locations. The Department of Transportation announced last Thursday the Trick or Streets initiative, which closes streets, plazas, and other commercial corridors across the 5 boroughs to cars to provide space for fun, spooky-themed activities throughout the month of October. And upstate New York is seeing homes fly off the market faster than anywhere else in the country, with 3 counties in the region landing in the top 10 for the quickest sales in August. According to the latest data from Redfin, a national real estate brokerage, 3 New York counties, Wayne, Monroe, and Saratoga, landed in the top 10 spots for the quickest home sales in August. Wayne County is located along Lake Ontario and is notably between the cities of Oswego and Rochester. Monroe County, for its part, is where Rochester stands, and Saratoga, located near Albany, is famed for its upscale resort town of the same name. In these counties, homes are on the market for a median of just less than 9 days, being scooped up, tying them for 9th place among nearly 1,000 counties across the U.S. And in Westchester County, where I grew up, the housing market is completely on fire. And finally, the piano man Billy Joel is once again looking for a buyer for his sprawling Long Island estate, relisting the luxurious property for $49.9 million after a 5-year, multi-million-dollar renovation, according to the New York Post. Known as Middle C, the 26-acre Center Island spread features 4 homes and offers more than 2,000 feet of private beach, a rare luxury along Long Island's affluent Gold Coast. Purchased by Billy in 2002, the estate expanded from its initial 14 acres to include adjoining parcels and additional waterfront lots. Joel cracked a joke about why he is offloading his Long time mansion, saying, I just want to spend a little more time in Florida like old Jewish guys from Long Island do. And we just love that man for it. With me at the table today from Brown Harris Stevens, Sarah Rada and Stephen Clem, Senior Executive Vice Presidents, Managing Directors of Sales, Eugene Cordano, President and Managing Director of New Jersey Sales for Brown Harris Stevens, and Robert Bisberg, Financial Consultant, American Financial Network, Inc.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at stephen@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
Okay, everybody, we are back. So we have a great cast here today. I love these people on this table, experts in what they do. We, as I said at the top of the show, there is a lot of change. The only thing I say all the time that's consistent in real estate in New York City is change. Every time we turn around, there's another law, there's another regulation, there's another change. Okay, so we've had a lot of significant commission conversations over the past couple of weeks here. We're going to get a little more into it, the NAR settlement, and understand, how it's going to affect our business going forward. We have right now not had to pay attention to it, meaning we're not legally bound to it, like the MLS users around the country. But that's coming, I would assume, this month, and so we're going to have some changes to the buy side. In any way, Gene, let me start with you. In what ways, in your opinion, has the NAR settlement expected to influence commission structures and pricing transparency in your marketplace, which are the suburbs of New York City? What is the latest on all of that in New Jersey?
So it's interesting.
Or in any MLS territory.
Yeah, territory. So it's interesting. We've been fortunate enough, I think, to have a market that's still very low supplied and high velocity as far as absorption rates, right? So you put something on the market that's not a tear down, you're pretty much assured that within 30 days, you'll be wrapped up in contract, and maybe 45 or 60 days, you'll be closed. So what we see is our sellers are primarily still opting to pay buyer brokers commissions. What we do see on the starter price points, say maybe 500,000 and below, is that those sellers are the ones who are beginning to haggle on the commissions and saying, I'm not going to pay the buyer's broker, let the buyer pay his own broker or his or her own broker.
And how is that working out, though? Are buyers actually agreeing to not only sign the agreement, but to pay if it comes down to that?
They are. So in New Jersey, we're a little bit ahead of the curve because on August 1, the state passed a law that required that buyers.
The New Jersey state law.
The New Jersey state law, which is
right.
Which supersedes, of course, the NAR settlement.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of the NAR settlement cubed, right? It made the tenets of the NAR settlement law, buyer's agency agreements required, no commission sharing in the MLS, property condition disclosure forms, and it also created another case of agency law, which was designated dual agency, which we in New York have had for years and works tremendously well, but in New Jersey we've never had it. So the buyers are reluctantly signing these agreements, but when it comes to paying for the commissions, it becomes a dollars and cents thing. So buyers' agents are able to present offers and still ask sellers to pay their commissions. And that's what we see happening more than not in this scenario.
I think that's going to be highly individual. And Stephen, let me ask you, so in New York City, where we have not yet instituted, are we able to sign agreements right now for buyers?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're encouraging people to get into the habit of doing it because you're right, it'll happen soon.
I think somewhere this month in October.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
Well, I'd say there may be an implementation period we're given, so we're probably looking closer to the end of the year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
From what you're hearing from your agent pool, are buyers reluctant to, again, pay the commission? They'll sign the agreement, but will they pay that commission? I've noticed in people I'm talking to, especially first-time buyers, that they're reluctant to pay a commission if the seller doesn't want to pay it because first-time buyers, that comes out of their pocket at closing. We're talking thousands more in a closing cost, payment, and they're like, I just don't have that kind of money.
I think some of them may be reluctant. I think what we're finding is many sellers out there right now are still seeing the value and offering compensation to a buyer's agent. So we're not running into a lot of friction in that regard where the buyer is actually being, asked up front to have to pay it. There is a substantial amount of cooperation on the part of the sellers to offer buyer compensation. So I can't say, I mean, we're only a small window of time into this. So I'd say maybe we'll know when we get 6 months, a year into this practice, how it's all going to play out. But right now, there's the occasional time where maybe they have to pick up a half a point or a point on the commission, and it's happening, or it becomes part of the negotiation where they actually make it a part of the offer. And then the seller, it all comes out some way in the price and the compensation. So
I think you're correct, and I think what's going to end up happening at some point is it's all going to become negotiable, just like everything else is. And maybe the buyer pays some, maybe the seller pays some. Maybe it gets negotiated back to the seller, and the seller pays all of it. I'm noticing, though, when people I'm talking to on the sell side, so far they're okay with signing what I call the old-fashioned agreements. Some have questioned it. I've walked away from one because they flat out said no. And interesting, in a building that I sell all the time, they gave it to somebody else who was, of course, very eager to take the listing. It's sitting there, and every time I bump into her, she says, "I don't even get visitation, Vince." I'm like, really?
yeah, well,
Now, we're not allowed to say that, really, to sellers, but quite frankly, what agent is going to show a property if they're not going to get paid for it?
well, some might, but that's all the more reason why, if you're working right now, you should get into the habit of getting a buyer representation agreement signed. I think because we are in that period where the switch might flip, and agents may be working with buyers right now where they don't need it at the moment, but a couple months down the road they might. So I think it's, Sarah and I often use this analogy, we've been giving a nice runway in New York City where we're not necessarily having to be obliged to what area markets like yours under an MLS with NAR have been obligated to the practices that they've had to go under, but we have had some leeway. We're not there yet, but we're getting agents into the habit of actually thinking about having these conversations with buyers. And interestingly, they've been going rather well for most buyers. Agents.
Yeah, I ultimately I think it will. I think it's just going to be a matter of how much time do we need to kind of flush out the newness and move forward. Sarah, though, but what about on the super high end luxury side? Okay, where 4 million, 5 million, agents who are dealing in that. With buyers in that range, are they having any kinds of issues that you're hearing of with buyers not wanting to sign those contracts? Because you think, buyers spending $4 or $5 million, well, they can afford to pay the commission. I mean, why not? I mean, it becomes a thing sometimes, but basically, I would think that it would be easier for them to say yes than it would be for a first-time buyer.
Yeah, because
on a lower end.
As of right now, as Steve mentioned, we're not there yet. This is I say this is the dress rehearsal. It's not showtime yet. So we don't have all of our agents asking for buyer broker representation agreements, but typically on the higher end, the commission offering is slightly reduced at times. So it's not we can talk about standards, but it is sometimes a bit lower. And what we're seeing right now is that sellers are still offering what they were prior because they know it's in their interest to cast the widest net, especially in New York City, where we're not really in such a fast-paced market like the suburban markets and outer regions are, because we do have a decent amount of supply. So we're not really finding that there's a need. So agents who can effectively communicate that to their buyers and say, this is really for transparency purposes so that who is responsible for what. We may not even need to have this conversation, but we have to have you sign this just, as a matter of practice.
I would add to that I think there's two types of buyers agency agreements that a buyer can sell. There's one that covers any property that you see within a certain period of time. It's a much more wider net that you've cast with that buyer. And then there are the buyer's representation agreements that just carve out the selected properties that you and that buyer go to see. I would say it's been an easier navigation for an agent to get a buyer to agree to the select property arrangement rather than the blanket arrangement. Would you say that's true in Jersey as well?
Yes, definitely. Especially with rentals. In Jersey, we have to do it for rentals too, which is an odd sort of complication.
Well, that's coming up here in New York.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah, I'm sure
that's
it is.
Next.
So, and that's an odd one because the tenants have always paid the broker fee, arguably, right? In most cases. So we get the most resistance to those things, and we use exactly that. Okay, well, we can't show it to you unless you sign this. So just, 123 Main Street, Apartment 1, If you want to work with us after that, we'll talk about it. But I need this to sign it, and that's how it's getting done.
And then you establish the rapport and the relationship.
Exactly, and you earn the business, right?
Yeah.
And you earn the business because
right.
I think that's the odd point about all these agreements because the buyer coming in to the agent, it could be first time. They have no frame of reference. They might have walked into an open house, for example, right? And now they're sort of thwarted, if you will, by having to sign this paperwork immediately. So it does give you some leeway to likewise let the buyer or the tenant decide if they want to work with that agent, and likewise for the agent if they want to work with that buyer or tenant.
Date before you get married, kind of thing.
Correct. True. Let me ask a question, Sarah. So, in the past, firms always, managers in all firms here in New York City usually had to approve any kind of different communication, right? We all like 6%, 5%. But sometimes we had to go down to 4% for whatever reason. And oftentimes companies would say, we don't really want to do that. We want to kind of stick to a higher commission rate. So people have asked me out there, so what is your firm doing with a seller that says, all right, I will pay a buyer broker 1%? Are we going to accept that or are we not going to accept that?
We really, if a seller insists on that, we can't really say we can't do that.
Right.
So we at Brown Harris Stevens or any real estate firm, we can say our policy on the selling side is a minimum of X. This is what I'm willing to work for, but what the seller offers as a buyer broker compensation is entirely up to them. And that is literally the whole point of this lawsuit and everything that we're dealing with right now is because we don't want sellers to feel that we are forcing them to offer a certain percentage.
But as Stephen said before, so you can get that difference maybe 1% from the seller, maybe the rest from a buyer. There's negotiation there, so you really don't know. But people are wondering, how are companies, not just here, but all over, going to handle, the fact that we're so stuck on a certain percentage of commission, split evenly, right? So now, the tables have turned.
We just have to communicate the reasons to the seller why it's in their interest to offer the buyer broker compensation.
Oh, yeah. And as I've said before on this topic, our negotiability or negotiation skills, rather, as agents have to get sharper and better because we need to have different types of conversations with people out there who are wanting to list with us, making them understand the whys and the why nots and what can happen if we don't do these things. Eugene, you mentioned inventory or shortage of it. We have the same problem here in New York City. Tell us a little bit about how, you guys can fix that problem. Is it going to be a matter of interest rates coming down more here in our country and sellers feeling like we can now list because we will get visitation or more visitation? Or is it just going to be a matter of pricing? I don't want to budge from my listing price, so I'm not going to list.
It's an interesting question because I think, you might have heard like bad news in the economy could be good news for certain sectors, right? So I think that I actually think that interest rates right now are not really driving the sellers either way, right? I think that the buyers, based on what we see, are still out there. So the interest rates are, it's important, but it's not as much of a factor. And you saw that we had a 0.5 basis point cut by the Fed just a few weeks ago, right? We're expecting more of those. Does that get us to where we want to be to free up supply? Probably not. I think the biggest problem for supply right now is that sellers who are not considering, relocating out of New York and New Jersey, right, and Connecticut, right, the tri-state area, look at, okay, I've got this property right now and I can sell it for probably the best price I'm ever going to get, which is just terrific, right? But now, if I'm not going to leave New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and I have to stay here and downsize and buy a smaller home or go to an apartment or something like that, if I sell my home in the suburbs for $1 million and I want to buy a 2-bedroom home, because I'm an empty nester, I might have to spend $800,000 or even more than that to buy it. So I think that that's really the thing that is binding up the supply of sellers right now. Because if you're going to take that $1 million and move out of state, you can go and really buy something with that money, right? But if you're staying here and you're not at that point in life, I think that, I think that's why we're sort of treading water on supply. And to your point about pricing, I think that, yes, if pricing starts to crater in a recessionary environment, which of course no one wants, but I think that would certainly probably get some sellers off the fence to say, oh boy, I better do something now rather than not.
All right, when we come back, we got to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the inventory issue. I like to say issue, not problem, here in New York City. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. We'll be right back.
The Everset provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
Okay, we are back. So I wanted to touch on a little bit of the New York inventory issue. Where are we with that? I mean, during the break, we were talking about if I have a 3% interest rate and I have 8 sellers lined up at a building that I sell in all the time, and they just will not pull the trigger. 2 reasons. One, well, I have a 3% or a 4.2, and what am I going to do? 7% now because I have to trade up?
Right.
Or I really don't want to negotiate on my price because, I paid X and I really don't want to sell it for anything less than that. Okay, we need the listings, people. 8 listings sitting on hold. Where are we, Stephen, with the actual inventory? It's a combination of everything, okay? It is pricing. It is interest rates. I mean, Gene made a great point. But how do we fix that here? Because if I remember correctly, when the Fed reduced, rates by 50 basis points, the mortgage rate went up by 50 basis points for a short period of time, right? So people are out there saying, well, what the hell, right?
Well, we saw our drop in interest rates actually, I think, before the September drop. We did see the rates trickle down, and we did see buyers going out and buyers signing contracts. There did seem to be a breath of life into the market over some of the summer. The problem we have right now is inventory is kind of a trickle. Quality stuff coming on is really a trickle. We have a lot of stale stuff that's been on for a while.
Correct. I know.
A lot of those buyers have seen that stuff. So, what's it going to take? We were talking about how, bad news in the economy could mean good news for the real estate, but no one wishes anything like that.
Right.
And I think, a lot of people are locked in, and maybe you're better to speak to this, but they're locked in at really low interest rates. And, to make a lateral move is people need to be motivated by I can get something better, or I can see value in the transition from one place to another. So that's what's really going to motivate sellers, is being able to see the value of making the move. If it's going to cost them or be just a lateral move with expenses, they're probably not going to do it.
Yeah, Robert Bisberg. So from a financial consultant perspective, what do you say about this?
Well, a couple of things. First, before we even get going, I just want to say thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation to join this great panel here for the discussion. And no financial discussion would be complete without a little bit of legal disclosure from our good friends back in California. So I'd just like to read my NMLS number, just so everybody has it, is 422745.
Really?
So you can go ahead and you can take a look at that if you like to. American Financial
That's not
Network.
his phone number, people. That's his MLS number, okay?
He's got that memorized, though.
I can give you the phone number, too. Call me anytime. I'm available. American Financial Network Incorporated has its own NMLS number you should know about, and that is 23734. And you can refer to the website known as www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org and input that number 2373441 to see where American Financial Network Incorporated is a licensed lender in all states. The principal license office for AFN is 10 Point Drive, Suite 300, Brea, California.
Oh, boy.
92821. American Financial Network is an equal housing lender.
Isn't
Just
that
riveting. Riveting.
So
that is a compliance commercial bar none. Okay.
Yeah. So that in and of itself speaks volumes, I think, to the industry and the state of where we are.
Very true.
Interestingly enough. But I think you did raise a very good point, and that is, if you're a seller and your mortgage interest rate right now is somewhere between 2.5%, 3%, perhaps maybe 3.5%, and you're thinking of downsizing, to Gene's point before, all of a sudden you're looking at a scenario talking about the value where you're going to go from $1 million property with a certain payment to arguably maybe a smaller property, but necessarily one that might actually wind up costing you more money, even though the price of that property is lower. So you could conceivably be in a position where you're buying an $800,000 property, but because your circumstances correlate to a rate of somewhere between 6.5, 6.75, maybe 6.25, whatever it might be. That is a very significant difference from the 3 that you're leaving behind. I think a lot of sellers are reluctant to make that change because, to your point, and astutely stated, there may not be a value proposition to doing it. And it may not satisfy the motivation for doing it, which is to reduce your cost or to downsize your property.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the emerging, trends or types of mortgage programs or products that are available out there. For example, adjustable rate mortgages, ARMs. I've been saying this for weeks now. My nephew, love you, Daniel, just closed on a house with his wife in Connecticut, okay? He got an adjustable rate, I don't remember how many years it is, at 5.5% interest. And as first-time buyers, it afforded them the opportunity to buy a house, move into a house, do whatever little repairs that they need to do. I mean, to me, and I think, one of my semi-regular panel members talks about it all the time, if we get to a point where we are at 5.5% by start of next year, that's not a bad place to be.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's not a bad place to be. So if they can get it today in an ARM, hey, hallelujah. What is your position on ARMs, and how good can we get in offering people financing?
Well, so
and for how long?
There's a lot there to unpack, right?
Yes, there is.
There's really a big discussion surrounding this. So ARMs can be a very valuable tool, right? So I think, as buyers and sellers in the real estate market, we have to be of the mindset that mortgages are nothing more than a tool. It's a tool to help you get to where you want to be. So whether you take an FHA mortgage, a conventional conforming,
It's leverage.
right? Whether it's an adjustable rate, whatever it might be, I think the mindset has to shift from what's my rate to how do I get to my objective by leveraging the tools that are available. That's first and foremost. The second piece of it is, I think for many buyers, particularly repeat buyers, not first timers, they're very focused on what the rate is. So the consequence of that is they have the internal memory of what rates used to be, and there's a built-in dissatisfaction with the current rate environment and the notion, I'm going to sit on the sideline because I think rates may come down. I would submit, and it's my opinion, that it would serve us well to get away from the rate discussion and get into the payment discussion. What is your payment threshold, and how can I use the tools that are available to me to get you to the payment you need to be at? Now, first-time home buyers are in a much better position for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have the recall of the lower rates, and they're not giving up a lower rate. They're saying, I got to get out of my apartment, right? I just got married.
Where rents are very high.
I need a bigger place, whatever it might be. But there could be a financial justification, even at the current rate environment, to say it makes sense financially for me, given the tax advantages and the notion that I'm subject to the possibility of appreciation and possibly a better living environment. So I think first-time homebuyers are really in the driver's seat in this market in many respects.
I would agree with that 100%. But again, we have the issue where there are sellers who really do want to sell, but they're locked in or stuck in place, right, with these very, very low rates. But, if we can come up with programs that make it a little more affordable, but I still question who's going to go from 3% to 5.5%, right? I mean, 5.5 is a
It's
great
only
rate.
if you need to.
It's only if you need
It's
to.
a need
Need-based
only
scenario.
at this
Well,
point.
in New York City, isn't it, I would hope, more need than
Yes.
anything else? You have to buy, you have to sell, you got to move, you transfer it in, whatever, job related. So, which kind of, brings me to the question of competition, increased competition. Do we see, as sales professionals here, real estate professionals, that competition among the ranks can get stronger because of the commission situation now? I mean, between
By
agents.
stronger, you mean more competitive?
More competitive. Do you see that at all?
I quite frankly, even before the NAR settlement, I was seeing competition.
It's always competitive,
Yeah.
but I think now with the commission conversation, it might get a little more competitive, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think it will. I think there'll be some agents out there when they're speaking with sellers who, are less persuasive about trying to explain the value of buyer agent compensation in an argument, or don't even have the conversation at all, and just accept what the seller would want to do without having any sort of discussion about educating them about how markets work, how buyers behave, what buyers expect in a transaction, what that does to closing costs for a buyer, having to take on that extra burden. So I think just naturally there will be some people out there who turn themselves into agents who undercut the value of their efforts in a transaction.
Yeah.
But I also think there may be models out there in certain markets by which people just see themselves as a buyer rep, maybe, and charge a particular fee for that. I'm not seeing that myself at the moment, but I think it may be something that in some smaller markets, I don't think it's going to be in luxury markets as much.
Yeah.
But I think
Especially in the co-op market in New York City, where you're doing a board package and there's so much involved in the process.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's
without a buyer's broker in a
differentiator.
co-op,
Yeah.
you're really dead.
For sure.
You're really dead.
You know, I think unfortunately the demographics of it kind of dictate where it goes, right? Because I think on the higher end of things, to your point, you have a more capable buyer and arguably a more capable seller, or a seller who can wait, right? We discussed about all these things. The interesting thing that I think on the flip side of what Steve said is you could actually see as competition increases, you could see sellers agents discounting their commissions too, to try and get the listings. I mean that
I hate that word discounting.
I know,
But your point is well taken.
I'm with you.
No,
I'm
I know,
with you.
I know.
But you know that I think that's a potential that you can see out there. You know, but to Steve's point, or his point, you have to clearly elucidate your value proposition to all your clients. That's the difference,
As
right?
I said earlier, our conversations have to be
Totally.
better.
That's
Our
it.
negotiations have to be
That's it.
better and stronger.
Totally.
You have to be able to convince people why these changes are happening and how it's going to benefit them, not
Right.
me.
It is
them,
right. We didn't make it.
We
right?
didn't make it.
We
Right.
have to abide by it.
100%.
Right. And so we're pitching for buyers now, in as much as we're pitching for sellers now, and I think that's probably the biggest change out of what comes out of this from a brokerage perspective or from an agent perspective. You know.
One of the
I
things
think
I've noticed.
skill and experience is really going to work to an agent's benefit. So if they have a lot of experience and skill and they can effectively communicate that to a prospective buyer versus a brand new agent or somebody that can't communicate their value effectively, that's where I think the more experienced agent is going to prosper.
Oh, I completely 100% agree. And I can see how some of the new agents today really have no frame of reference, right? Just like first-time buyers, they don't really have the interest rate, memory, whatever. It's going to be a little sloppy in the beginning until they get their feet on the ground. But the more experience you have and the more negotiability you can bring to the table, I think the better. And it's all the way you put it. But monthlies, I just wanted to talk a minute about monthlies. I'm hearing things, like next year in January, well, actually this past January, co-op and condo maintenance has gone up in some cases as much as 15% over the year before. And people say to me, well, how much can we just absorb?
Yes.
Right.
So to Bisberg's point before, listen, people are concerned about monthlies, right? How much, especially first-time buyers,
And
how much
also
can I buy?
in an environment where there's a lot of inflation, restaurant costs, everything.
And that's one of the
Expenses are
reasons
really high, right?
why because of the interest rate, unchange, throughout the last year and a half, people are like, hey, wait a minute, between the maintenance, between the real estate taxes if I'm in a condo, and now the double on the interest rate, I just can't afford it.
Right.
I just can't afford it.
The only thing you control is the mortgage when you buy the apartment.
Well, exactly.
And the rest of it is just going to continue to go up. Right.
How do you, my question, so what do you do about it? Maintenance is never, or common charge is never going to stop going up. But when I hear things like between 10 and 15%, gone are the days of 3, 4, 5% increase.
Well, I think there were markets where buyers might have stretched. They might have.
That's never
they
a
might
good
have
thing.
gone a little. They might have gone a little bit farther because they knew
Very
that
true.
that the market would keep pace with them. And I think there was a time, in the past 10 years when we could look at that and say, with a certain amount of comfort, that's a possibility. I don't think anybody should be doing anything like that right now. I think it's definitely make sure you're making decisions that fit within your means.
And also, if it's a primary residence in New York, you can see if the building qualifies for the co-op condo abatement, and the star abatement. So those are things that can help you a little bit, but it's something to consider.
Hey, any little bit helps
Counts.
and
It
counts.
does,
Exactly.
everybody.
Let's talk a little bit about, the COVID pandemic. We all went through that drama and whatever. But how has post-pandemic life and the shift to remote work? Now, I know in a lot of companies they're changing. I think Google made a statement recently that you have to come back to work in the office by a certain period of time or, run the risk of losing your job. How has, the remote working model affected, real estate from the agent perspective? Like, you go in the office sometimes and there's very few people in the office, and that's in all offices all over the place. I mean, even up in Westchester, I stopped in to get a flyer the other day in Houlihan Lawrence, I think in Somers, empty in the middle of the day. So why is that continuing, and how do we change that? And is it important to make that change? I know how you feel about that, and you, but is it important to make that change?
Sure, because business happens in the office, talking to people, comparing notes, talking about new listings, getting tips, things like that. I was always, as an agent, in the office like it was my full-time job, and I
Same
only
here.
left to look at property, but I learned from my peers, I learned from my managers, and also I
Water
enjoyed
cooler.
being with people. Yeah, culture is a huge part of we're social creatures by nature, and I think COVID separated us a lot and isolated us. And people I see are craving connection again and craving structure and just more routine. So I see an increase in the attendance in the office. In our office, we also moved. We have a beautiful new office. But I think it's just not just what people get from the office, but how they feel when they're there. And I think that that's really important.
And more often than not, I can see a connection between coming into the office, speaking with your colleagues, getting in touch with the pulse of the market in terms of what your colleagues are seeing, not just what you're seeing. It directly relates to how productive that agent
true.
is.
I completely agree. And I was just going to say, I'm like you just said, Sarah. I was always the same thing. Whether I had anything to do in the office for that day or not, I was in that office. And for most of the day, right? I'd left to go show property, whatever. But I wonder sometimes, and I think maybe it is a fact that the market kind of stalled, came screaming back in 2021 after pandemic because in New York, you can't keep New Yorkers down, but then kind of slowed again. I think a lot of the reason we blame interest rate, we blame inventory or lack of, we blame a lot of things. I'm going to add to it the fact that brokers are just kind of like checked out.
Yes.
And are not checking into the office where you say you get more stimulation and get more motivation. I have to believe that that's true. You're sitting at home, what are you doing? You're not paying
You're more
attention.
distracted,
You're
because when you're physically sitting at a desk, you have something that you're more likely to say, I need to drum things up. I need to do something. Right. Whereas if you're at home, you may be distracted by the news, TV, shopping,
Correct.
whatever it is, cleaning. You have to be in the office, and that's where the business happens, in my opinion.
There's another component to it also, and that is real estate and mortgages can be a complex business, right? There's an educational component as well in collaborating with your peers in the office. Before becoming a regional manager here at AFN, I had my own mortgage company many years ago, and I made a transition from my own shop to a big retail, big bank organization. And I will tell you that I was very fortunate because I happened to sit directly next to somebody who had been in that environment for a number of years. And I really credit that individual for my success in the organization. Without her tutelage, I probably would not have made it. There's just too much to learn over too short of a period. And to your point, you want to be that resource to your buyer or borrower, as the case may be. And it's impossible or very difficult to do that without the right support from a good organization. So I think there are a select group of people that prefer to be in the office for exactly that reason. So.
I agree. Listen, 22 years ago when I started in the Upper West Side office, I sat on Diva Lane. You all know what Diva Lane is, okay? Superstar agents, I'm like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing here? Right? Brand new out of corporate America. What did I know about anything? Okay. Well, to your point, they trained me.
Osmosis.
It is.
Well, you got to listen.
hear
You
things.
got to listen to their
phone
conversations,
calls.
right? You
They
got to see
took
how
you
they
by the
handle
arm and
difficult
said, I'm going
stuff.
on a showing, Vince, come with me. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's the reason
whatever.
why you stayed at the company, right? Because of those people, right, who
Correct.
gave you a
Correct.
shot and who, gave you the chance
Well-
and took you under their wing.
Right.
In Soho, you probably remember this. Richard Orenstein sits in the back of the office, and literally all the agents would just be like this, listening, because he was always on the phone speaking.
Of course.
And they would come up to me and say, I got so many great talking points listening to him speak to his clients on
100%.
the phone. You don't get that at home.
No.
You know, and also things like something happened a couple weeks ago. I was in the office on the later side. Somebody walked by and I just said, "Hey, how are you doing?" He told me about something, and I said to him, it was for a rental, and I said, I think your clients are renting in an apartment that's not legal. Let's look up the certificate of occupancy. Turns out it was an illegal apartment. And I was thinking, if he didn't walk by at that moment and I wasn't there either, this could have been a tough situation for everybody. So it's just important for everybody to show up, I think.
Well, and think of the times we've put together a buyer with a listing agent, an agent working with a buyer with a listing, because we've known ahead of time that property is coming on the market.
Right.
That particular buyer is looking for that type of property. And we've made the connection. So, I mean, if the one thing I would say to anybody who's a work from home person on a steady basis, I'd say if your days are full of appointments, meeting with sellers, working with buyers, if you're doing business while you're sitting in your home office, okay. Fine.
Yeah,
Great. Knock yourself out. But if you're sitting at home and the phone's not ringing and
you're
not aware
trying to
of
find out what's out there.
You're not aware of what the value of that 2-bedroom co-op apartment between blank and blank street is, then you should be in the office and you should be connecting with people.
No,
One thing you
100%.
just reminded me of, but if you come into the office, you can't take the other people, say to everybody, oh, business stinks, business stinks, business.
Well, no one's going to want to talk to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want them to lift you up. You don't want to bring them down. That's the only thing I would say.
I will say that I've observed an uptick, I would describe it as an uptick, really, in agents' willingness to get together with people like myself to understand what the current state of the mortgage industry is. And I recently had breakfast with somebody, and we got into a conversation about why this agent thought that was. And I think to Gene's point before about being a resource to your buyers, I think agents have a thirst for the information that's going to help them become a better and a more productive partner to their buyers.
Better equipped.
And mortgage is an integral piece of that solution to their housing situation. And I think people are reaching out because they realize I'm not getting it because I'm not in the office, but maybe there's another path, and the path may just be through my network and my colleagues that have other disciplines. So I think it's not a lost point, and to your point as well. So
we've had a number of challenges that we've faced over the past, year or so. So I'd say getting around people who are facing those challenges as well and talking about what they're doing with regard to the NAR settlement, with regard to limited inventory, with regard to, does a buyer want to pay a commission or not pay a commission? Just finding out what people are saying about all this stuff is very helpful. And you get outside of that, isolation, and you get more engaged in the market.
Comparing and contrasting always works. I don't care what industry you're in. You need to know what your competitors are doing, your colleagues are doing. It's healthy. You have to understand the whole picture. And there's so much to the whole picture. All right, we got to take a quick break. No one's going anywhere. We will come right back. We're going to talk a little bit about technology. This is Talking New York Real Estate on the More Network. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is supported by the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. Real estate touches every aspect of our lives, from design and architecture to investing and the economy. Now there's a way to get all your real estate information in one place, the More Network. With more than 20 podcast and webcast series, the Mastery of Real Estate Network is powered by Brown Harris Stevens, one of the country's most distinguished brokerages. Discover advice from notable entrepreneurs, compelling topics, and access to top global real estate experts. Subscribe to their YouTube and Apple podcast channels by visiting getmorenetwork.com.
Okay, we are back. Gene, I wanted to ask you about the suburbs, okay, in New Jersey in particular, where you live and work. So post-pandemic, right? We're talking about people not really coming to the offices, that much. I know it's the same elsewhere. I've seen it in Westchester. I've seen it in Jersey, and all over the place. What is your perspective on it all? What has the pandemic, in your opinion, really done by way of changing how we look at our industry and how we act and work in our industry?
Yeah, I mean, that's a
I mean,
great
I think it's
question.
profound.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, people talk about the unicorn event, right, or the unexpected. I mean, COVID was that. I think the biggest offshoot of what's happened to the benefit of those outer markets of those suburban markets is that you have a lifestyle choice that people are making, right? And I think that's what's driving lower attendance in office buildings and things like that. Some people might say it's a little complacency. Maybe we're very comfortable and we can work from home, and working from home works great. All of those things. But I think that people during COVID, since they were forced to stay home, got to enjoy their lives in a different way, and so it kind of, I think it changed our American model to be a sort of quasi-European model where we began to enjoy life more, enjoy family more, enjoy friends more. We had more time for that, and because we could work so well remotely. Because I arguably, I think during the COVID times, we were very efficient and very productive, right? Let's take real estate out of it. I mean, just a general economy. If you're an engineer, if you're working, if you're in publishing, whatever you were doing, you know, you were on at 8 o'clock in the morning. You didn't have commute time. You didn't have much of a lunch time. When your superior, your boss calls at 8:15 and says, "Where are you?" You know, I'm right here. I'm logged in. And so you were getting a lot of productivity from workers, and that benefited New Jersey tremendously. I mean, I have to tell you that post-COVID, the levels of pricing moved from 2020 all the way through, and they continue. They're not presently in 2024. They're not necessarily rising pricing there, but they're certainly not declining. And those values have not come down because people have, you know, a lot of people have moved out there and have stayed. Now there are some anomalies where people have come back and they got bored with the suburbs and all that other stuff. But for the most part, that event drove people out to the suburbs, and they've stayed and they've planted roots, and I think it benefits those suburban towns too. Some of them have been gentrified, right? People look for value. They're priced out now of established towns, right?
Value, okay.
Value, yeah. I know. Go find it. I'm with you. But it exists. It exists. But you got to go a little farther, right? You got to go maybe a little bit off the train line. You got to go west into New Jersey, or you got to go north, or wherever. But people will find it, and they'll make it work, especially with the financing contingency of where my dollar can go. I've got to pay 6% interest rates, but they're making it work, and so. I think that's where we are, suburban post-COVID, and it continues. It's great, I have to say. The market is very strong. We just really could use some more supply.
Yeah,
and we're going to get it. It's coming. It's coming. Let's talk a little bit about technology. Robert Bisberg, I call him Bisberg. Bisberg and I started our careers at IBM. Okay, you want to talk about technology? We're not even going to tell you how many years ago. Okay, that's a long time ago, right? When technology was, this big mainframes on cool floors and whatever.
IBM ruled the world.
IBM ruled the world, and our phones have more processing capability today than those mainframes did. But I want to talk a little bit about how technology has changed, how it affects the real estate industry. Artificial intelligence, a year and a half ago, when it started becoming a buzzword, everybody was frightened, ran under the bed and closed the door and locked it. What am I going to do with that? I don't even know I can't even explain it, right? Love it.
Does it write your questions? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It helps me on my intro, though, not my question.
Sure.
But how is all of this, transformed the way we do business of real estate? What about it now is more helpful than it ever was? Or is it? I mean, video, anything.
One thing that came to mind as you were speaking just now is just during COVID, we all moved to Zooms, right? And I'm sure you guys all remember co-op board meetings, when they would meet a prospective buyer. Agents would tell their buyers, don't go on vacation because you'll have to show up for the interview in person. Whereas now, a lot of those co-op interviews are done via Zoom. And it's very helpful to buyers, to agents, to everybody. So just something as simple as that, I find in New York City, like it was a huge benefit. Using the technology of Zoom, it saves us commute time to come up for meetings.
That's a perfect example because I remember the days, fighting with buyers who I don't have time to go to a meeting in person. Exactly. Why can't I? And I'm like, you have to go. Right. Period. Well, I'm coming from out of state. Whatever the excuse was. Now it's Zoom. closing, right? Who goes to closings anymore? I still like to do that, but who goes to closings? It's all remote, right? And they kind of encourage you not to go.
The counter to that is I think sometimes we hold a Zoom meeting now when we could have just sent an email. So I think there is
I want to see your face. That's what it's all about.
The easy accessibility of it, I think, has in some ways made it that we do more than we need to at sometimes.
Of course.
One other thing I would say on in terms of AI or in terms of technology is a lot of what we've dealt with over the past, even with the advent of the internet and properties moving to websites and search aggregators being available and all that stuff, it's not ever replaced the need for an agent and an agent's skills and an agent's value in a transaction. We just have not. Everybody said, "Oh, this will be the death of the agent."
No.
With many technological innovations, they've said this will be the death of the agent. That has not happened. I will say the one thing about AI, and I think take Chat GPT for an example. I think it can be a useful tool. We use it sometimes when we're pulling together content. We put in the very basics of what we needed to do, and then it generates something back to us, which we then can tweak. What I like about some of this technology is the time that it's going to save an agent in terms of producing something. It might take an hour's worth of work down to 15 minutes. That's 45 minutes you can use with clients, with customers. It's valuable time that you will save that can be put into more high gain activities.
But the only concern I really have with AI, and ChatGPT is amazing, but when you hear college students say, "Wow, thank God, it helps me get through writing my papers and doing," and I'm thinking, okay, so where's the learning? I mean, anybody can kind of pump in anything. Where's the creative process? Where is the learning? What are you getting at? Anybody can write a brilliant paper using, artificial intelligence. Okay. But, at a younger age, and how you can't really stop people from using it, right?
No, my daughter is an advertising major. She's a junior in college, and they're using AI to write scripts and they're using it to test things, but they actually do limit what they are allowed to do by AI, because they still, at least at a collegiate level, they want them to learn to be able to be creative on their own. And I think that's very important, because I think, at some point, if we're going to depend on machines, I mean, I don't know, I'm dating myself. We all remember Terminator. It didn't go well. It didn't go well.
It didn't land well.
It didn't land well. It didn't end well. It didn't. I'm just saying.
No, it did not.
I mean,
right.
but AI. But in real estate, we've used sort of soft AI for years, right? On the websites and emails and things like that and chats, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is effective. Especially it drives traffic. It does drive traffic.
It can make us more efficient, but can't replace us. There's no question about that.
Bisberg, so from a technology background.
I was just going to tell you.
Wax poetic.
There is an unbelievable progression and revolution, I would say, taking place in the mortgage industry right now. So first and foremost, for the borrower experience, it's been so streamlined that a borrower in the comfort of their own home can tap out an application from their cell phone in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes with the basic information, submit a full application for approval by an underwriter into a company or pre-approval, whatever it might be. That process has improved that experience exponentially. It's a leapfrog in anything we ever had to do before. I remember back in the day sitting down with a pencil and paper with a 1003 application, filling it out in front of somebody in the office, a 90-minute interview in some cases, talking about different things. That's all gone. There's no need for that. It's certainly available, but there's no need.
It's all happening through software.
It's happening through the software. But on the AI side, here's a truly impressive thing. There is a company out there that sells an AI solution to approving a mortgage application. So a borrower can submit an application to the loan officer, whoever that may be. The loan officer can submit it through the AI channel, and an AI tool will evaluate that and in some cases approve it for clear to close without an underwriter intervention. Now, it's subject to review in some cases when you disagree with it. It's not the Terminator scenario. I just want to be clear about it. It would be exciting, but it's not there yet. But the revolution that's taking place in the mortgage space is absolutely fantastic.
But what do the underwriters think about that?
Yeah, they must not like that.
Well,
Oops.
listen,
I mean, it's an underwriting
here's what I can tell you. I'm not aware of any company that's implemented this technology in reducing the underwriter.
But they will.
The question becomes, what do all of our jobs look like with Zillow, right? Everyone was afraid that Zillow was taking over and we were all going to lose our job.
Yeah.
Street Easy and, an online application. Well, I want who's going to meet with my borrower? My job's going to go away. It hasn't really happened that way. So I think what's happening is the customer experience is going to be improved. And I think the review standards are going to be implemented in a way that's going to mean a very thorough application. And for those people who participate, I think the experience is going to be tremendous, really. I think it's going to be phenomenal.
Change, as we keep talking about, the entire episode, all about change. We have a few minutes left. Let's talk about the current state of the market. Sarah, you've seen it all, from good markets, bad markets, whatever. Where are we right now?
Well, I've been away for 2 weeks, so Steve might want to take that, but I'll tell you where things were before I left. The listings are moving at a faster pace due to, I think, interest rates coming down. It's what we were waiting for. So we definitely saw an uptick in the last 2 weeks of August. It was actually the busiest end of summer we had ever seen.
Yep.
And I think it had a lot to do with that. What my feeling is that people are thinking, oh, wait, rates are going to come down. Maybe I should wait a little bit longer. Let's see what happens with the presidential election. So that's where it was like this little burst of activity, a little bit of a quieter period. And Steve, maybe you can add the last 2 weeks.
For being away for 2 weeks, I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's been a very much a wait and see kind of market. It's not that we haven't seen listings come on the market. It's not that we haven't seen signed contracts. We just haven't seen them at the volume that we would have hoped for, given the fact that we felt we were actually gaining some momentum. It's been an average fall, and I think a lot of people are sitting around and waiting for more interest rate drops. I would say that if anybody's really smart right now, they are trying to leverage the market that we have at the moment and the lack of great consumer interest to see if you can negotiate on the price. Because I'll tell you, if the rates do drop more, which they probably are going to do, you're going to find more people enter the market, and you're going to lose it in the price.
I just find it like very laissez-faire. For example, I have an investor very interested in Anna and Beau's property downtown, which is significant in price. Very interested. It's like, okay,
there's no urgency.
Make a decision.
Yeah, there's none.
Talk to your talk to your underwriter. Whatever he tells me, it's like just do it.
I always say, no one wants what no one wants, and everybody wants what everybody wants.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we are right now.
And until someone else wants it, I don't want
exactly.
it. Which makes very little
the sad
sense.
part is,
it should be the opposite.
But there's a very high-end property, you know it, and it's like he just sits back and says, "Well, it's still available."
Exactly, and he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
But
somebody will. But
somebody will come in, and then he could end up paying more than he would have. He should take advantage of it now. And rentals, I think that they did very well as a result of the rate increase.
Right.
But we're noticing that they're softening a bit because of those buyers that would have rented. They're saying, okay, rates have come down. We're seeing more first-time home buyers come into the market, which we weren't seeing a lot of because of the affordability issue. But now we're seeing that, and as a result, the rentals are not as robust as they've been for the last couple of years.
Correct. Gene, what does it look like out in your territory?
In Jersey?
In Jersey, right.
I can say that.
That's okay. We get it.
And look, I have to say, I think it's not that much different.
I mean, we talk about inventory. We understand what that's all about.
Totally.
But overall.
Overall, though, I think the market is still pretty strong. There's still a good demand out there. I mean, our biggest problem is that supply.
Yeah.
We're seeing, if you get a cookie cutter high-rise condo building, you're seeing a little bit of negotiation, right? To some of all of your points, right? If I'm going to get the A line on the 14th floor, the 15th floor, the 16th floor, what's the difference? That kind of stuff is going on right now. So it is a little slow from that perspective.
What about condition? Because I mean, in the city, condition is a
absolutely,
deterrent.
Totally.
Is it
Same thing.
Okay.
If it's turnkey and you can drop your bags, you're going to get your number and maybe then some.
Yeah.
But if it's a to your investor point, right? If it is a rec, we don't really see that many apartment recs anymore, right?
Well, he wants to convert it into 14 home, kind of, which is
Right,
great. So
like,
it's right up
sure.
his alley, but
Yeah.
it's still like, where's the sense of urgency?
Well, because it's an investor, you got to put 40% down.
Correct.
Right. You're
Well,
paying
he
you're
can.
paying a
He
higher
can.
rate to begin with, so that half a basis point didn't help you because you're going to pay more, and then you got construction costs, and that's where you really see the pricing. Well, A, that they languish, or B, that the pricing comes down.
Right.
It used to be if you had I'm probably we're dating ourselves, right? But it used to be if you had a wrecked apartment or a wrecked house, you had, 10 different, people coming, knocking on your door going, all right, I want it. You don't have that now.
You do not.
You just don't have, the costs are just too high.
The inconvenience.
And
The
yeah,
inconvenience.
and what's right, exactly, the inconvenience. And then, if you're a builder or a developer, I mean, you've got to make something on it too, right?
Yeah.
And can you squeak out 10%?
Well, but the cost of construction and renovation has gotten incredibly high
insane.
and very expensive. So,
Very
people are
high.
kind of saying, well, all right, interest rates are high, purchase prices haven't really come down. Now I'm going to buy something that needs $100,000 on the low end of renovation. Well,
with higher carrying costs.
with higher carrying costs.
And we as an industry have done such a good job of marketing everything to its best
Yes.
light that I think a lot of people nowadays, when they go out and they see an apartment, the virtual staging has made them think it's different. I think it's elevated what people expect out of an apartment, which just isn't the reality necessarily.
I totally agree. Robert, we're out of time, but close us out. What is your opinion on the state of where we are and where we're going to be in the next 6 months?
Now, I think as we turn past the election, things are going to look very different. The one thing I do know about the mortgage interest rate market is that market really does not do well with uncertainty. And right now with the Middle East, the presidential election, the economy, there are so many economic indicators and so many uncertainty points right now. Once some of this clears through, I think if we get the 50 or maybe 25% reduction we're looking for, I think the fourth quarter and into the first quarter of next year are going to be very strong, and I'm very optimistic about it.
Way to go. We're coming right back with my closing thoughts for the day.
Hi, it's Stephen Bailey from Roadway Moving and Storage. Listening to Vince Rocco, you know the right partner makes all the difference. At Roadway, we deliver an experience your clients will love. For specialized services and white glove care, choose Roadway. Want to learn more? Email me at steven@roadwaymoving.com or visit roadwaymoving.com.
All right, we are back with my closing thoughts for this week. Change can be incredibly inspiring, particularly in fields like real estate, where the landscape is constantly evolving. As industry dynamics shift, driven by factors such as technological advancements, economic fluctuations, and legal reforms like the NAR settlement, professionals are prompted to rethink their strategies and adapt to new realities. This transformative environment encourages innovation, sparking fresh ideas and creative solutions that can lead to greater success. For agents and brokers, navigating these changes means not only enhancing new tools and practicing, but also reimagining how they connect with their clients and their clients' needs. The challenges presented by change often reveal hidden strengths and the potential motivating in individuals to grow and expand their skill sets. Ultimately, in our profession, change serves as a powerful catalyst for inspiration, pushing us to pursue our goals with renewed vigor and purpose. Change can be incredibly inspiring in our personal lives as well, offering fresh perspectives and new possibilities. It allows us to get out of our comfort zone, encouraging us to be more creative. Whether it's a shift in personal circumstances or professional transition, change challenges us to rethink our approach and discover hidden strengths. And as Vince Rocco always says in one of his famous hashtags on social media, #JustDoIt. And that's our broadcast for today. Thanks to my guests for being here on set with me. You can follow me on Facebook, on Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok at Vince Rocco, or my website, thinkvince.com. Nelson Mandela said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing or falling, but in rising every time we do fall." And from all of us here at Talking New York Real Estate and the More Network, to all of you all around the world, thanks for spending a part of your day with us. I am grateful, and I will see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.